Hi there, I'm Kathleen Jasper, and today we're going to go over some specific skills in word recognition and reading to help you with your teaching reading Praxis exam, your Science of Teaching Reading exam, and your Pearson Foundations of Reading exam. It's really important that you understand the science of teaching reading in order to answer these questions correctly on the exam and also to be an effective reading teacher in the classroom. Let's get started. All right, so I get a lot of questions about teaching reading, specifically for the exam, and many people have a hard time with distinguishing among all the different skills students have to acquire in order to become readers, in order to have comprehension. And so today we're going to focus on these particular skills, and I'm going to break them down in a way so that when you are taking the exam, you can identify easily what skills we are talking about. Another question or statement I get in our emails and things like that is that people don't understand kind of the process in which students acquire language and acquire comprehension. And many of you are general education teachers who are required to take the reading exam. And so this might be confusing to you, but I want you to think about teaching reading as a science. We do this the same way we teach math, the same way we teach science. There is a continuum of skills. There is a process, and these skills should be taught explicitly and systematically. Remember that for the exam. We know through lots of reading research that in order for students to become good readers, they really have to be taught these skills individually and explicitly. And I'm going to show you what that looks like as we move through the steps. Now, one more thing. When I talk about these skills, I usually use a continuum or some sort of linear process. We start with one skill, we move to the next skill, we move to the next skill. And generally speaking, that is the way it happens. That's the way these skills are acquired. But I always caution you when in the real world to think of it more as a mosaic rather than just a straight linear process, because depending on what students are reading and depending on what words they're looking at, they may move in and out of this continuum, and it's not such a linear process in the real world. But on the exam and when we're thinking about these skills in teaching, we do want to have some sort of a step-by-step process so we can be explicit and systematic in our instruction. All right, so the first skills that students acquire when we are talking about language, word recognition, and reading are phonemic awareness and phonological awareness. Now, these two skills, phonemic awareness and phonological awareness, have to do with sounds in words. Phonemes are the individual sounds in words. And this is very important. When students are working on their phonemic or phonological awareness, they are doing this by listening and speaking. We do not have to see the word. When I first started to become a reading teacher, the reading coach told me you can do phonemic awareness in the dark, meaning I could do it with my eyes closed. I do not have to see the word. Once we start looking at the word, that is phonics, which is another skill that I'll talk about in a second. But for now, we are just listening and speaking. So this is all done by listening or with our oral skills. Okay, so remember that, especially for the exam, because there might be some definitive factors in the answer choices that lead you to that. So phonemic awareness is a sub-skill of phonological awareness. And phonological awareness encompasses a lot of listening and speaking skills as it comes to words. Let me show you what I mean in a presentation. All right, so I often use this umbrella to talk about these particular skills, but I want you to think of phonological awareness as the overarching umbrella. It encompasses a lot of skills. And then under that umbrella is this foundational skill of phonemic awareness. So let me give you an example. Phonemic awareness has to do with individual sounds in words. So if I asked you how many sounds in the word track, you would say t, k. 4 sounds, right? Now I'm going to write the word on my presentation, but this is just for our viewing purposes. If we were doing this with students, we would not write the word because we are doing phonemic awareness. So when we see the word track, and again, this is just for us talking about the word, this has 4 sounds, t, k. Now, if I said, take out the t sound, you would say rack, right? So with phonemic awareness, we are thinking of just the individual sounds. We might delete those sounds. We might swap out the sounds. Now, we might use phonemic awareness to make nonsense words. So for example, if I said, say the word track, and you said track, and I said, replace the t sound with a p sound, you would say prack. Well, prack's not a word, right? But we're not concerned with that. We're just dealing with sounds in words, and having students substitute and delete different sounds inside the word is part of phonemic awareness. And it is a part of word recognition that will lead us to higher skills on down the road, okay? So that's phonemic awareness, those individual sounds in words. But once we have those individual sounds in words, we are going to then use them to do other things. And again, when we talk about phonological awareness, we're talking about a multitude of skills having to do with the sounds in words, and we're putting them all together. So for example, in this word track, and again, in the real world, we wouldn't have to see it. I would just be saying it to you if you were my students. I might say, break up the word track by its onset and rhyme. And so the students might say, ter-ack. Now, let me tell you what onset and rhyme is. Onset is the beginning consonant or consonant cluster. So this is the onset, all right? So in the word track, the onset is ter, and the ack is the rhyme, and that's R-I-M-E, not R-H-Y-M-E. Now, when we teach students this, we're teaching them how to segment words based on the onset and rhyme, and we can do this just orally. And this is more complex of a skill than just phonemic awareness, where we're identifying individual sounds in words, but instead we are breaking the word apart in different ways. And so that's one way to do phonological awareness. We might blend sounds in words. We might manipulate the endings in words and things like that, where we're not just focusing on individual sounds, we're actually putting them all together and breaking them apart in different ways when it comes to sounds in words. For example, in the word peanut, and again, I'm writing it for you, but you wouldn't have to if you were talking about it with students, I might say, break the word peanut into two distinct sounds or two distinct syllables, and they might go peanut. Okay, we are just talking about the sounds in words, but instead of breaking it up by individual sounds, we're breaking it up by syllable or compound word. And in this case, it would just be doing that orally and with our listening skills. So that's phonemic awareness and phonological awareness. You get phonemic awareness first, and then you use all of those skills then to move into phonological awareness second, okay? You can't have phonological awareness unless you have phonemic awareness, okay? So that's like a mini continuum right there. Now, once we have the sounds in words, we move on to phonics. Now, phonics, we have to actually see the word. And when we talk about phonics, we are talking about code-based learning. So phonics has to do with what's going on inside a word, and then we know what that word is. We also call this letter-sound correspondence. Letter-sound correspondence, or it might be referred to as phoneme-grapheme correspondence. Phonemes are the sounds, graphemes are the letters. Grapheme means written, right? So that's a couple ways you might see it. So make sure you understand when we're talking about phonics, we're talking about code-based. We're also talking about letter-sound correspondence, which also means phoneme-grapheme correspondence. That grapheme is the writing, are the letters, okay? What does that mean? Well, let's have a look at this word make. Now, we don't say this word make as make, right? We say make. The A is long because we have this silent E after this consonant here, right? That's a code inside the word telling us how to pronounce this word. That's letter-sound correspondence. The way the letters are made up in the word determines the sound. For example, in the word receive, this C does not make a K sound. It makes a S sound. Well, why does it make a S sound? Because it's followed by an E, I, or Y, and that's the code. When a C is followed by an E, I, or Y, as in cycle, as in receive, The C makes a S sound. Now, there are all these different codes inside of words. We know the English language is very complex. Now, phonics is a much higher level skill than phonemic awareness and phonological awareness, because now we're not only using the sounds that we learned in phonemic awareness and phonological awareness, but we are applying it to a code or a grapheme inside of the word. So this is a much more advanced skill. So remember that phonics comes after phonemic awareness and phonological awareness. And again, it's code-based. And one other thing, phonics should be taught explicitly and systematically, just like we talked about with phonemic awareness and phonological awareness. Research shows that we should be breaking down words based on the codes in words and decoding words in order for students to understand the words and then later apply that to reading. Now, when we talk about reading, we talk about the Fab Five of reading. And you can see here that phonemic awareness and phonics are down at the bottom of that continuum of the Fab Five of reading. Now, phonemic awareness is the first skill. Phonics is the second skill, right? Then we move into fluency. And fluency is when we're actually using all the skills we learned in phonics and phonemic awareness to read words fluently on the page. When we read a passage and we move through the passage without making any mistakes, that's accuracy. Or when we read with inflection, that's prosody. When we stop at periods and pause at commas and read with expression, that's prosody. And all of that moves us towards this ultimate goal of comprehension. Also, we need to acquire vocabulary. So as we are reading fluently through text, we might get to a word that we don't quite understand. And so we might use different clues inside the sentence, inside the passage, perhaps even pictures next to the passage in order for us to figure out some more complex vocabulary. Now, we still get vocabulary in phonics, right? We know that what make means if we see the word make when we're little kids, and we know what the word play means when we see the word play when we're little kids. But when we talk about vocabulary in this context, we're talking about it in a reading passage where it's more complex and we're trying to figure that out based on the meaning, based on syntax clues, based on those things. And so that's the next step after fluency. And then ultimately we get to this place here, comprehension, which is a high-level skill that requires critical thinking, metacognition, where students are predicting, summarizing, and understanding the text by creating pictures in their minds. Now, this is a very abstract skill, and it's really difficult to acquire. And that's why it's so important that we move through this Fab Five, or this continuum of understanding words, before we can get to comprehension. And again, this should all be taught explicitly. And so just like math, there's a progression from addition to subtraction to multiplication to division. The same thing happens in reading, where we're starting with the sounds in words. We're looking at the codes in words. Then we're putting that all together in fluency to read them all on a page. Then we're figuring out the complex of meaning of words. And then we're getting to that abstract skill of comprehension, where we're making pictures in our mind and understanding the whole thing in context as we read. Now, one more thing to remember. I want you to burn this image into your brain. Phonemic awareness has to do with the sounds. So make sure when you are thinking of phonemic awareness, you're thinking of the ear and the mouth, listening and speaking. Phonics, you have to actually see the word to decipher the code inside the word and then say what the word is. So make sure you understand this when we're talking about those. All right, so I hope that helps you today with your reading exam and also understanding the different skills students need to acquire in order to become readers. Remember those different ways in which we apply phonemic awareness, phonological awareness, and phonics. You will get lots of test questions about that, and you'll have to decipher in the answer choices, sometimes even what level these skills are at. But there are always going to be some sort of clue in the question stem and clues in the answer choices that will bring you to the right answer. Let me know in the comments if you have any further questions, and it'll be my pleasure to help. I hope you have an awesome day. If you're looking for more support in your teaching reading exam, head over to KathleenJasper.com and you'll see we have a brand new teaching reading online course. We also have a study guide for this particular exam, and you can get either one here. However, when you buy the online course, you get the study guide. So everything is included in this online course, including hours of tutorials and extra practice quizzes that you can use to test your skills. Thanks for watching. Bye.